This story was narrated by Vid Crew Media. Please show your support by like and subscribe. Thank you. There is. Jared nodded. All I need to do is to extract the dragon throne's hatred and destroy the vengeful dragons. Walter was ecstatic to hear Jared's reply. In that case, Mr. Chance, please go ahead. Why should I help you? In your eyes, I'm nothing but a fraud, Jared sneered. Immediately, Walter was filled with remorse. Mr. Chance, it was my mistake. I didn't know any better and offended you instead. I hope you won't hold it against me and are willing to save my life. Walter pleaded sincerely. At the same time, Tommy interceded. Mr. Chance, Mr. Grange didn't mean to insult you. I hope you can help him as he will still be of use to us in the future. Tommy's intention was obvious. Walter could be instrumental in the Templar Regiment's expansion in Horrington. Therefore, by helping Walter, Jared would be helping the Dragon Sect at the same time. Going forward, if you have any use for me, I'll be at your service. Walter hurriedly made his stance clear. Only then did Jared nod in agreement. Fine, I'll help you destroy the dragons. With that, Jared walked up to the dragon throne. His hand darted out to press on one of the dragon's heads. The next moment, a strange scene unfolded. The carved dragon began to emit a faint golden hue. What followed was the sound of agonized dragon roars that rumbled on incessantly. Meanwhile, Tommy and Walter watched on in astonishment. Illuminated by the golden light, the 9 dragons began to move and rise into the sky. While their bodies emitted a black mist, they stared furiously at Jared, as if he had foiled their grand plan. In the blink of an eye, the black mist enveloped the entire living hall, causing Tommy and Walter to have difficulty breathing. At the same time, the century-old trees outside seemed to have sensed what was going on and began to sway violently even though there wasn't any breeze at all. With their mouths gaping wide, both Tommy and Walter were stupefied by the sight of the giant dragons. Walter, in particular, was already drenched in sweat. The thought of how he had been sitting on top of a group of demonic creatures every day caused him to tremble in fear. Hatred-induced dragons, begone. Jared's expression was calm. With a flick of his hands, rays of golden light penetrated the dragons' bodies. Unleashing roars of desperation, the dragons began to morph into balls of black mist, which then flew toward Jared. Opening his mouth, Jared took a deep breath to suck the black mist into his stomach. In the very next moment, peace returned to the living hall. Draco's focus technique is amazing. It can actually absorb and cultivate energy from hatred too. The thought delighted Jared. Other than cultivating spiritual energy, the focus technique was able to do the same with hatred and anger, absorbing them to increase one's strength. Having digested the energy from hatred, Jared could feel his power growing stronger. After a long while, Walter finally recovered from his shock. He quickly went up to Jared and bowed. Thank you, Mr. Chance, for saving my life. I will never forget this. Don't mention it. I was just doing it for my own self-interest. Jared waved his hand dismissively. The energy he derived from the hatred absorbed was more than what he could cultivate in half a month's time. Walter was slightly surprised as he didn't know what Jared meant. Nonetheless, he didn't dare dig any further. After all, there was a lot about the supernatural world that was beyond comprehension for laymen like him. Turning his gaze to the dragon throne, Walter carefully asked, Mr. Chance, about the throne. The dragon throne has become an ordinary chair. Other than satisfying your ego, it has no other use. That aside, you have to take meticulous care of the old trees in the villa grounds, as they are the key to you living a long and healthy life, Jared remarked while looking at the trees outside. It was a shame the trees couldn't be transplanted, as the spiritual energy they emitted would have been helpful to his training. If they could, Jared would have transported them to the top of the hill at Dragon Bay. All right. I'll have my men take good care of the trees. Also, with regards to the spiritual brush and cinnabar rosary, I'll help you find them too. I happen to know Abbot Erasmus of Lagrange Monastery very well and will get him to help, Walter offered. Thank you, Mr. Grange. Jared nodded. It's getting late, so I'll have to take my leave. After checking his watch, Jared realized it was almost noon and time for him to go home for lunch. Mr. Chance, if you don't mind, why don't you have lunch here? I'll get someone to prepare it right away, Walter nervously invited. Considering Walter's utmost admiration for Jared, he wanted to ingratiate himself at every available opportunity. Looking at Walter, Jared nodded in agreement. I hope I'm not imposing. Not at all, not at all. Elated at Jared's response, Walter ordered his servants to prepare the food immediately. Meanwhile, at Horrington Hospital, Leighton's arm had been wrapped up in a sling while Sandy stayed by his side. Damn that Jared. Once I've recovered, I'll definitely kill him, Leighton bellowed out of frustration. Jared had broken his arm, threw his wedding into chaos, and turned the Scott family into Horrington's laughingstock. Consequently, there was no way Leighton would take all that lying down. Don't be angry. I ordered Warwick to teach Jared a lesson by hiring professional fighters this time. He'll definitely have Jared beaten to a pulp, Sandy remarked while peeling an orange. If the Sullivan family hadn't gotten in the way, Jared would have been dead. A cold glint flashed in Leighton's eyes. Gritting his teeth, he grabbed the orange Sandy had peeled and threw it into his mouth. Right at that moment, Sandy's phone rang. After answering it, her expression drastically changed before she ended the call at once. Who was it? Leighton asked. It was Warwick. He said that they were beaten up by Jared. Not just that, but his arm was also broken. Sandy frowned. What in the world did Jared learn during his 3 years in prison? How did he become such a good fighter? They're nothing but useless scum, especially your classmate. *CK it, looks like I need to do it myself. With his rage intensifying, Leighton gave Sandy a look before pulling her over. Then he tore off her clothes without warning. Ah! Sandy screamed out of embarrassment as they were inside the hospital. However, Leighton couldn't care less because of the urge to vent his rage. Just when he was preparing to do so, he realized he couldn't get it up. All at once, he was seized by panic since he didn't know what was wrong. Can my broken arm affect the performance of other bodily functions? Is it because you're too nervous? Sandy asked meekly. Nervous your ass. Get in position for me, pushing Sandy forcefully, he began to get it on again. Unfortunately, it was a futile effort no matter how hard he tried. Ahem. Suddenly, Yoel entered the room. When he saw his son trying to hump Sandy, he blushed instantly and coughed to announce his presence. Both of them were given a fright. As for Sandy, she quickly put her clothes back on. This is ridiculous. With your hand broken, how can you still engage in such horseplay? Yoel admonished Leighton. Despite hanging his head, Leighton's eyes were burning with rage. Dad, I want Jared dead. No matter what, he must die. At that moment, Leighton blamed his impotence on Jared. He assumed it was related to his broken arm. In truth, Jared was responsible for it. However, it wasn't because he had broken Leighton's arm. Instead, he had crippled Leighton's manhood at the Gibson residence. Stay out of the matter, and just focus on your recovery. Since Tommy didn't take any action against him, I have to investigate and find out what sort of backing he has. Although Yoel was furious, he didn't let his anger get to his head. He knew that there was a reason why Tommy didn't touch Jared. Dad, that B*****, shut up. Before Leighton could finish, Yoel shot him a fearsome glare, frightening him into silence. Mr. Scott, I know Jared very well because we were together in university. He doesn't have any sort of background or support. His dad used to be a government servant but became a street cleaner after he was sacked. So, don't let him frighten you, Sandy explained while straightening her clothes. You know **T. Yoel shot her a cold glance. You stupid **TCH. If not for you, Leighton wouldn't be in this condition. You're nothing but a jinx. Yoel stormed off the moment he finished. In truth, he had objected to their wedding as he felt that Sandy's family wasn't up to his standards. Unfortunately, Sandy somehow managed to bewitch Leighton to the extent of getting him to marry her. Sandy's face purpled in anger after being scolded by Yoel. Nonetheless, she didn't dare say a word of protest. This was the price she had to pay for marrying into a rich family. Damn that Jared. I'll never forgive him. Sandy hissed through her clenched teeth after Yoel was gone. She didn't dare offend Yoel or Leighton. Hence, her only option was to vent her frustrations on Jared. Back at Walter's villa, he, Tommy, and Jared were drinking happily together. They had enjoyed each other's company throughout the entire lunch. Everyone present was envious of Jared for being able to share the table with such illustrious men despite his young age. Mr. Chance, today's meal is just a casual one. But tomorrow, I plan to hold a feast at Glamour Hotel, where I'll be inviting distinguished guests from both the political and business establishments of Horrington. During the dinner, I'll sing your praises. Walter declared proudly. Walter's intention was clear. He wanted to open doors for Jared in the city. After the banquet, no one in Horrington would ever dare mess with Jared again. Despite how generous the invitation was, Jared intended to reject it. He wanted to keep a low profile and focus on his training instead. After all, his aim was to wait for the 15th of July. Before he could respond, Tommy preempted him. In that case, I would like to thank you, Mr. Grange, on behalf of Mr. Chance. Your recommendation will be of significant assistance to Mr. Chance's affairs in Horrington. Since Tommy had taken the liberty of accepting the offer for him, Jared didn't say another word. Instead, he nodded slightly. You flatter me, Mr. Grange. After chatting a while longer, Jared and Tommy finally left. My lord, please forgive me for accepting the invitation on your behalf. Although the Templar regiment is expanding rapidly, we've hit a plateau outside of Horrington. Moreover, many other factions are eyeing our turf. Therefore, we're left with no choice but to strengthen our network further, Tommy explained his actions softly in the car. Jared was caught by surprise. Aren't you the absolute authority in Horrington? Is there someone out there trying to challenge you? Jared didn't understand why Tommy felt threatened. Based on his understanding, no one other than the political elite dared to touch him. Tommy replied in an embarrassed tone, My lord, those are just the assumptions of ordinary folk. Other than us, there are other factions in Horrington, such as the Crimson Dragon Gang and the Moon Sect. This doesn't even include the lesser factions around. The Crimson Dragon Gang and the Templar Regiment are mortal enemies. Every year, both sides will suffer casualties from their struggle against each other. However, their gang leader, Stephen Fisher, managed to learn the impenetrable skill from somewhere. Hence, I'm afraid I'm no longer his match. Staring at Tommy, Jared could see that times had been tough for him over the last few years. Despite how glamorous he looked in the eyes of others, it was nothing but appearances. In truth, people like him faced danger every single day of their lives. If anyone causes you trouble, just let me know, Jared stated. Given that the Templar regiment was subordinate to him, there was no way he would ignore their troubles. Tommy was delighted. Based on what you just said, I'm no longer afraid of anything. With you at the forefront, no one will dare stand in your way, let alone someone like Stephen. Having seen how Jared annihilated the 9 vengeful dragons, Tommy was so impressed that he utterly worshipped Jared. Surprised at how adept Tommy was at flattery, Jared broke into a smile. When Jared arrived home, his parents weren't around. He figured they were out for a stroll, which he thought would do them good. Without anyone to interrupt, he stayed in his room and continued his training. With no time to waste, he trained as hard as he could. After all, he wasn't sure what he was going to face on the 15th of July. Although Draco promised him a wonderful opportunity, he was worried that the opportunity could also be dangerous too. Sitting with his legs folded, he chanted the mantra of the focus technique. As his abdomen began to move, the surrounding spiritual energy was gradually drawn into his body. Jared continued training the entire night and even missed dinner. Huff. The moment he opened his eyes, he puffed out a ball of turbid air. I didn't expect the vengeful dragons to be so powerful. Gently clenching his fist, Jared felt the power coursing through his veins. Evidently, he had made a breakthrough. At that moment, Jared had reached level 5 energy cultivation. When he was in prison, he had only achieved level 4 under Draco's guidance. Hence, he was ecstatic and pleasantly surprised to have ascended to level 5 after absorbing the 9 vengeful dragons' energy. Jared felt as if he had found a shortcut for his training. As long as he absorbed the energy generated from hatred and vengeance, he was able to advance his training at exponential speeds. Nevertheless, it was a shame that an encounter with such objects depended on luck, given how rare they were. After exhaling gently, Jared got out of bed and straightened his clothing. At that moment, Hannah's voice rang out. "Is that you, Miss Sullivan? Although I can't see, I can recognize you from your footsteps." "Mrs. Chance, you're really sharp," Josephine replied with a smile. "Don't be a stranger. Just call me Josephine." You're right, you're right. Josephine it is." Hannah's face lit up as she nodded repeatedly. "Are you here to see Jared? He's still holed up in his room." Turning, she then yelled in the direction of Jared's room, "Jared, get up, quick. Josephine is here to see you." "Mrs. Chance, there's no need to shout. I'll go get him myself." Upon saying that, Josephine headed toward Jared's bedroom. When Hannah heard Josephine's footsteps walking toward her son's bedroom, she was so excited that she almost jumped for joy. "That son of mine even lied to me about them just being ordinary friends. Do ordinary friends go straight to the bedroom? I'm dying to see how my future daughter-in-law looks like," Hannah mumbled to herself. Walking up next to her, Gary whispered into her ear, "Darling, let me tell you, Miss Sullivan is the prettiest girl in the city." "Really?" Hannah was surprised as she was aware of how high Gary's standards were. Back when Jared was still together with Sandy, Gary had objected to their relationship. Now that he had made an approving comment, Hannah was certain that Josephine was undoubtedly a great beauty. "My son is really something. Despite having just been released from prison, he's found a girlfriend and even hid her from us." Hannah beamed with pride. "That goes without saying, especially when you think about who he takes after. With my genes, there's no way he can go wrong." At that moment, Gary was proud of his son. Instead of the gloomy expression he had in the past, he was now smiling all the time. "Enough, stop boasting. Anyway, take me someplace else right now so that both of them can have some privacy." As she spoke, Hannah pulled Gary out of the mansion. Meanwhile, Josephine pushed Jared's bedroom door open and entered. When she saw Jared standing by his bed with his clothes smoothed out, she was stunned. "So you were already up? Why? Do you not want me to get up? Or do you want to see me naked?" Jared teased. "Pfft, no one wants to see you naked." Josephine rolled her eyes. Nevertheless, she was slightly excited by his quip. The fact that he was joking with her meant that their relationship had improved significantly. "There's something I need your help with." Come with me. Without waiting for him to respond, Josephine pulled him along. Before he could ask her where they were going, Josephine had led him into the car. Checking his watch, he realized that he still had some time before the banquet Walter organized in his honor happened. Hence, he allowed Josephine to tow him wherever she wanted. Focal Mall was an exceedingly renowned shopping mall in Horrington with almost all the major brands available. Hence, Jared was a tad surprised that Josephine brought him there. "Did you bring me here to accompany you shopping?" he inquired apprehensively. After all, it was a vastly scary matter to accompany a female shopping, and he had personally experienced the horror of it. Back then, he once went shopping with Sandy, and she spent the entire day at the mall. Therefore, he was seriously traumatized. "Why, are you not willing to do so?" Josephine countered, looking him straight in the eye. "Of course not." Jared shook his head in denial. "If I'm honest, I'm pretty proud to accompany her shopping since her status and looks are top-notch. Innumerable men will envy me for getting to keep such a woman company while she shops. But then, I've got something to do at noon. I've already promised to meet Walter, so I can't stand him up. I've got a prior appointment at noon, so I'm afraid that I might run late," Jared answered honestly. "I don't care what appointment you have, but your main task now is to keep me company while I shop." After saying that, Josephine dragged him into the mall. There was a dazzling array of products, but Josephine towed him over to the section selling men's clothes before holding up shirt after shirt in front of him. "Are you planning to buy me clothes?" Jared exclaimed in astonishment. "Who else would I be buying clothes for? My closet at home is already bursting at the seams." Josephine wasn't idle as she spoke, her hands flipping through the clothes. In the end, she chose a suit and placed it in his hand. "Go and try it on." Jared stood rooted to the spot for a moment with the suit in his hand. Seeing that, she remarked, "Are you waiting for me to go into the fitting room with you and help you into it?" "No, it's okay." Jared shook his head frantically even as he hastened into the fitting room. At the sight of his terrified expression, Josephine giggled, the tenderness in her eyes growing all the more pronounced. When Jared walked out in the suit, her eyes lit up at once. She looked him up and down before commenting in surprise, "I didn't expect you to have such potential. You're much more handsome when you wear a suit." Noticing the admiration in her gaze, Jared couldn't resist looking at himself in the mirror, only to realize that he indeed appeared far more striking. Ever since he went to prison and started training with Draco, his desire for material things had faded over time. Despite having some money after being released from prison, he was still wearing his old clothes from before. A wardrobe change had never crossed his mind as training was a better use of his time than shopping for clothes. "What are you planning to have me do with you?" "Attend a wedding," he asked. "Never you mind. This is even more important than a wedding." Pulling him along, Josephine bought him shoes and a watch as well, transforming him into a dapper and handsome man. Jared could only allow her to drag him around, going with the flow. As they continued shopping, the things on him increased. Not only did Josephine buy him a tie and belt, but she even spent tens of thousands to buy him a small lighter. On the whole, Jared's entire ensemble cost at least a few hundreds of thousands. "Aren't you being a bit lavish here?" Jared was even beginning to feel a touch nervous to walk around while wearing such an expensive outfit. I really don't quite understand the mentality of rich people like her. What's the point of spending hundreds of thousands to buy a suit and tens of thousands on a lighter?" "Nope, not at all. You were dressed too shabbily in the past. I can't allow you to dress in such a manner anymore in the future, or people will be laughing at me," Josephine replied placidly. But just after she finished speaking, she abruptly realized her slip of the tongue. At once, her face flushed bright red. Meanwhile, Jared's lips curved into a smile when he heard that. Why would people be laughing at you if I'm dressed shabbily? At that question, Josephine's face blazed hotter. Shooting him a glare, she snapped, I've already asked to be your girlfriend in public, so people will naturally take me at my word. Aren't you just embarrassing me if you dress shabbily? Okay, this matter is now closed. I'm going to the washroom, so wait for me here. She hurriedly left after making up an excuse. Chuckling, Jared stood there and waited for Josephine. Many ladies who spotted him when they walked past inexorably turned back and stole another glance at him. Several of them even came over to him and asked for his contact, but he turned them all down. Coincidentally, Sandy and Juliet were also shopping on the other side of the mall. Still seething after having been hauled over the coals the day before, Sandy planned to go on a shopping spree to cheer herself up. Quick, look, Sandy. A handsome man is standing across from us. His back alone is mesmerizing, Juliet said to Sandy in an excited voice. Hearing that, Sandy hastily lifted her head and cast her gaze over. Sure enough, she caught sight of a tall man in a suit standing ramrod straight opposite them. From his mere back, one could sense the noble aura he exuded. Could it just be someone with an arresting figure but unsightly looks, she wondered in a whisper. No way. I can sense that he's definitely a handsome man. You've already got Mr. Scott, so leave this gorgeous specimen to me, Sandy. No sooner had Juliet finished speaking than she eagerly rushed over. Sandy was also curious, so she promptly followed. Are you waiting for someone, handsome? Juliet questioned, moving forward and tapping the man's shoulder. But the instant the man turned around, both Juliet and Sandy were wholly confounded. Jared? Why is it you? Juliet exclaimed with surprise written all over her face. Sandy was staggered as well, for she had never seen this side of Jared despite having been with him for a few years. It looks like clothes really do make the man. Why not? Jared sneered when he saw that it was Juliet and Sandy. How could you patronize this mall? The things here are extremely expensive, Juliet demanded with a puzzled expression. The products in this mall were so expensive that ordinary people couldn't afford to shop here. In her eyes, his family background was far below average, so it made no sense that he'd appear in the mall. Besides, the clothes he was wearing seemed to have cost a fortune. Is this your family's mall? I can patronize it any time I want to do so, Jared retorted unceremoniously, instantly leaving her speechless. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, Jared. You can never become someone of high standing even if you dress the part. How shameful to buy some imitation suit somewhere and come here in hopes of hooking up. Bah. Sandy proceeded to spit at the man. Before Jared could speak, Josephine strode over. That's none of your business, you shrew. Wipe your filth off him, Josephine ordered, pointing at the spit on his clothes with a frosty expression. When Sandy saw her, unease crept into her eyes. Crap. As the daughter of the richest man in Horrington, I'm nothing when compared to her. Nonetheless, she was naturally chagrined to be rebuked in front of so many people in the mall. Not only that, but she was instructed to wipe Jared's clothes too. Thus, she still tried her best to maintain her composure. Why, you'd better watch your tongue. Stop throwing your weight around just because you're the heiress of the Sullivan family. I told you to wipe it off. Are you deaf? Say, if I were to slap you across the face now, would Leighton dare seek me out to avenge you? It was clear as day that Josephine's imposing aura intimidated Sandy, for the latter started trembling imperceptibly. She knew that she would only suffer the slap in vain because Leighton wouldn't make an enemy out of the Sullivan family for her sake. Meanwhile, the corners of Jared's mouth turned up as he stared at her. He merely watched with a sneer without saying anything. I'll do it. I'll wipe it. Upon seeing that things were going downhill, Juliet quickly took out a piece of tissue to wipe the spit off Jared's clothes on Sandy's behalf. "Who do you think you are? How dare you think that you're worthy of touching my boyfriend?" Josephine pushed her away in short order. Juliet felt so mortified that her face flushed bright red, but she didn't dare utter a single word of protest. Even Sandy didn't dare offend Josephine, much less her. "The two of you are just too much to pick on us, ordinary people, just because you've got wealth and power. Everyone, come and see this. The heiress of the Sullivan family is a bully." Sandy staunchly refused to wipe Jared's clothes for him, for she couldn't get over the contempt within her. In the past, it had always been him pandering to her and being at her beck and call. For that reason, she couldn't accept the reality that she was to lower herself before him then. Right that moment, she feigned weakness, hoping that the people around her would take pity on her and lend her a hand. Slap. While she was trying to seek help from the bystanders, Josephine stepped forward and struck her right across the face without the slightest bit of hesitation, stunning her to the core. "That's enough nonsense from you. I said to wipe it off right this instant," Josephine asserted, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. Sandy's hand flew to her face, and she glanced at the crowd around her. Alas, no one spoke up for her. That aside, some timid ones even left quickly, not daring to stay and watch the show any longer. Left with no other choice, she could only take out a piece of tissue in the face of Josephine's icy expression. Then, she dragged her feet over to Jared and bent down to wipe the spit off his clothes. Jared looked down at her with a smirk on his face. But when her hand was a second away from coming into contact with his suit, he dodged it. Taken aback, Sandy looked up at him. "I'm afraid that your hand will dirty my clothes." After saying that, Jared wiped the spit off himself with a piece of tissue. "How dare you?" Sandy's chest heaved violently, yet she had no retort to that. "Let's go." Taking Josephine's hand, Jared strode out of the mall. As Sandy glowered at their backs, she was so livid that she shook with rage. Gritting her teeth, she spat, "You be ****, I'll never forgive you for this, Jared." Regretfully, Jared had long since exited the mall and could no longer hear her. "You're rather feisty today. But it isn't quite appropriate with your identity as the heiress of the Sullivan family. Your reputation will be negatively affected if news of this gets out," Jared said to Josephine when they had left the mall. "Ah, never mind that. I get mad whenever I see her." Josephine clenched her jaw, her face still stained with a trace of wrath. In the next moment, she turned to the man. "Were you frightened by my demeanor?" In response, Jared shook his head with a smile. "Nope. You're pretty appealing when you get up in arms. Since you like it, how about I do it to you every day?" Josephine inquired, a gleam of something glinting in her eyes. "No, no," Jared waved his hands frantically and immediately changed the subject, asking, "Where exactly are you bringing me that you dressed me up so nicely?" "Mr. Grange is hosting a huge banquet at Glamour Hotel today. Many distinguished people in Horrington will be in attendance, and I heard that it's exceedingly difficult to gain entry, for they don't even allow the guests to bring their families. Anyway, it's at my family's hotel, so I can bring you in without an invitation. Then, you can make the acquaintance of the eminent figures in the city," Josephine admitted frankly without keeping him in suspense. Conversely, Jared was torn between laughing and crying after hearing that. "Walter is hosting the banquet for my sake, yet she now wants to sneak me in. Why are you laughing? I'm serious. Besides, Mr. Grange is purportedly hosting this banquet to introduce a friend of his to the big shots in Horrington. Right now, everyone is speculating about that friend of his. And do you know how many people want to attend the banquet this time yet haven't the right or opportunity to do so? If the banquet weren't being held at Glamour Hotel, I wouldn't even have the chance to bring you in." Make sure that you seize this opportunity and make an impression, Josephine exhorted. Okay, I'll do my best. Jared chuckled, not telling her the truth so that he could give her a surprise later. Unwittingly, he could also sense a shift in his feelings toward her. While neither of them said anything, they were both aware of the other's feelings since some things could be discerned tacitly. Yoel rushed to Horrington Hospital and tossed a suit at Leighton, ordering, "Change and come with me. I'm recuperating, Dad." "Where are you bringing me?" Leighton inquired with bemusement etched on his face. "To a banquet," Yoel answered. "I don't want to go. My arm is broken, and I'm now recuperating. Why should I attend some banquet?" Leighton instantly lost interest after hearing that. He had attended quite a number of banquets, and they involved nothing more than feasting and drinking besides singing each other's praises. Furthermore, he would have to wear a suit that would keep him very much uncomfortable. Hence, he didn't feel like going. "Do you know who's hosting the banquet this time?" starred. "It's Mr. Grange. Everyone who's someone in Horrington is attending the banquet. As such, ensure that you make a good impression this time. I'll be handing the businesses of the Scott family to you in the future, and I don't want you to run them to the ground." Yoel snarled, smacking him upside the head. The instant Leighton heard that Walter was hosting the banquet, he didn't dare utter a single word of protest anymore. He hastily changed, but he couldn't manage with a broken arm. "Where is your girlfriend? Where did she go instead of taking care of you here? Call her over and have her help you out. I want to see you at Glamour Hotel at 11 o'clock later. Don't be late. I've still got something else to do, so until later." Yoel left as soon as he had finished speaking. Glancing at the time, Leighton didn't dare tarry anymore. He gave Sandy a call and ordered her over right away. At 10:30 in the morning, the entrance of Glamour Hotel was already cluttered with luxurious cars. All the prominent figures from the political and business circles had arrived early, long before the banquet would begin. They all greeted each other and exchanged pleasantries before entering the hotel with their invitations in hand, one after another. However, their accompanying family members could only wait outside the hotel. Walter only invited the head of each family and the leader of each department to the banquet this time because he wanted to reduce the number of attendees. He was afraid that Jared would be annoyed if there were too many people and it became too noisy. Leighton, too, came with an arm in a cast while Sandy supported him at his side. When Sandy saw the countless big cheeses there, her excitement was so great that her heart almost pounded out of her chest. "Stand here and be on your best behavior. Don't cause any trouble for me as the attendees this time are no ordinary people," Yoel cautioned Leighton. "Am I not going in, Dad?" Bewilderment was written all over Leighton's face. "Huh? He asked me to come here, yet he's not allowing me to go in?" "Of course not. Only the heads of each family or leaders of different ranks are invited to the banquet this time. What right do you have to enter?" Yoel snapped, glaring at him. At once, disgruntlement swamped Leighton. "Why did you call me here if I can't enter? I'm going to burn to a crisp outside." Hearing that, Yoel was tempted to kick his idiotic son hard. Plenty of people are waiting outside. Is he saying that they're all fools? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Making acquaintances can only be beneficial to the development of one's company. Alas, all he knows to do are eat, drink, and play. He never considers anything else. "Mark my words that I'm going to cut off your allowance for half a year if I don't see you when I come out," he threatened, afraid that his son would take off at a whim. As soon as Leighton heard that his allowance for half a year was at stake, he shuddered in fright and nodded fervently. "I won't be going anywhere. I'll be waiting right here." Finally, Yoel entered the hotel with peace of mind, leaving Leighton and Sandy to bake in the sun at the entrance. Right then, Jared and Josephine arrived. as well. Wait for me here. I'll go and make arrangements for us to sneak in through the back entrance, Josephine said to Jared after alighting from the car. Jared nodded in acquiescence. Josephine then left to make the arrangements while Jared stood there and waited around. Everyone there was from the upper echelons of society, so he didn't know any of them. As such, he could only fiddle with his phone. Having sharp eyesight, Sandy spotted Jared at once. When she noticed him scrolling through his phone with no one paying him the slightest mind, a sneer immediately bloomed on her face. "Lay, isn't that Jared? How's someone like him worthy of attending the banquet?" she whispered to Layton. Layton cast his gaze over when he heard Sandy's remark, only to see that it was indeed Kai. His eyes glinted coldly, and he strutted over. Seeing that, Sandy hurriedly trailed after him, glowering at Kai with resentment burning hotly in her eyes. The incident at the mall earlier remained vivid in her mind. "Do you think you're worthy of being here, Kai? Are you aware of the statuses of the people here today? Do you think you're an elite just because you've put on new clothes?" Layton regarded Kai with an air of arrogance. On the contrary, Kai merely threw him a chilly look before ignoring him altogether. "Where's your domineering demeanor back when you were at the mall earlier, Kai? And where's your beautiful Miss Sullivan? Why didn't she bring you in? Could it be that even she couldn't get in?" "Pa." Sandy again spat at Kai, convinced that he wouldn't dare order her to wipe it off with Layton there this time. At that, Kai's face went glacial. "Mark my words. You'll be licking it off like a dog later. Ha ha." Laughing uproariously, Sandy spat at him again. "Who do you think you are that I'll be licking it off you? You're just an ex-convict. What's so great about you?" Then, she raised her voice and hollered, "Everyone, look here. An ex-convict is all dressed up to attend the banquet. He doesn't even know his place." Her shout attracted many people who all gathered to watch the show. Nevertheless, Kai remained indifferent as he watched her incessant acting. "Who's that, Layton?" "He doesn't seem familiar," a young man about Layton's age asked out of the blue. After all, everyone who came was people of high standing in Horrington or their family members. Therefore, they were either acquainted or had seen each other in passing. Kai, however, appeared exceedingly unfamiliar and didn't seem to be someone from the elite classes. For that reason, someone asked Layton about him out of curiosity. "Oh, him? He's my girlfriend's ex-boyfriend. He was her lapdog for 3 years but didn't even get to hold her hand. Later, I put him in prison, and he was there for 3 years. He was just released 2 days ago," Layton explained with a derisive expression. Following his words, everyone around them threw contemptuous looks at Kai since people of high statuses like them were loath to be anywhere near an ex-convict like him. Everyone promptly shied far away and started whispering about the man. Despite that, Kai remained calm and unruffled as though he couldn't hear anything. "You've really gotten shameless after your time in prison, Kai. Do you still have the nerve to stay now that things have come to this?" Sandy derided with a layer of frost on her face when she saw that the man wasn't at all bothered. Kai. At that precise moment, Josephine was done making the arrangements and returned. The second she caught sight of Sandy and Layton, she instantly frowned. "What are the two of you doing here?" "We're naturally here to attend the banquet," Sandy proclaimed proudly. She wasn't afraid of Josephine with Layton by her side, backing her up. Pfft. Josephine burst out laughing upon hearing that. "Attend the banquet? Why are the two of you still standing here, then? Is it because you don't have an invitation and couldn't even get past the door?" Sandy opened her mouth, but no words came out because they indeed hadn't an invitation and couldn't enter. At the look on her face, Josephine's lips curved upward. Taking Kai's hand, she declared, "Come, let's go in." When Sandy saw that they were going in, she was promptly startled. Do you two have an invitation? I'm not telling you that, Josephine retorted with a smug smile. Sandy felt as though she was on the verge of bursting a blood vessel. But when she noticed them heading toward the back entrance, realization dawned upon her at once. They're planning to sneak in via the back entrance. They don't have an invitation either. Leighton had also worked that out, so he swiftly stepped forward and blocked their path. How could you two sneak in the back entrance when you don't have an invitation? I'm going to expose you both. Are you dumb, Leighton? Glamour Hotel is my family's property, so I can enter from wherever I want. What can you do even if I want to jump in through the window? Josephine questioned as she eyed him as though he was an idiot. At once, Leighton was left without a single retort. Keep a close eye on them. Kick them out if they dare sneak in from the back entrance. Josephine ordered the few security guards. Understood, Ms. Sullivan. The bodyguards immediately trained their gazes on Sandy and Leighton. Meanwhile, Josephine entered the hotel from the back entrance while dragging Kai along. As Leighton and Sandy stared at the couple's backs, intense fury brewed within them. After going into the hotel, Kai texted Tommy and told him to give Yoel the boot. He didn't want to dine with the latter, nor did he want the Scott family to know about his identity. In truth, he wanted to see how much longer Leighton and Sandy could provoke him. In the hotel, everyone surrounded Walter with deferential expressions on their faces. Some of them were even aware of his penchant for collecting antiques, so they had searched high and low for rare antiques as a gift for him that day. Beside Walter was a burly middle-aged man with a grim expression who was vigilant at all times. That was his personal bodyguard, Luca Turner. Luca was a retired member of the Dragon Squadron and once protected Walter when the latter was still holding office. When the man stepped down, he did the same and continued guarding him ever since. Walter would bring Luca along for security purposes every time he attended a public event. Ladies and gentlemen, I have some rules at this banquet of mine today. Firstly, I'm not accepting any gifts. Secondly, I'm not going to discuss business. I merely want to introduce a new friend to all of you, so please make yourselves at home, Walter declared loudly after waving a hand to shush the crowd. Many people had actually heard about this even before coming, but they were still inexorably surprised when they again heard it from the man himself. They wondered about the impressive background of the person he was going to introduce since he wouldn't be making such a fanfare otherwise. Why isn't Mr. Chance here yet? Walter asked Tommy beside him after glancing at the time. He'll probably be arriving soon. Tommy hadn't any idea why Kai wasn't there yet when they had hammered out the details the day before. No sooner had his words fallen than his phone buzzed. When he saw that it was a message from Kai, he showed it to Walter. After scanning through it, Walter nodded lightly. No wonder he hasn't made an appearance yet. It turns out that there's such a reason behind it. It was my oversight. Upon saying that, he cast his gaze at Yoel in the near distance. Right that moment, Yoel was also anticipating the appearance of the young man Walter spoke of. Someone whom Walter Grange attaches such importance on is definitely no ordinary person. If I get in with such a person, the Scott family might be able to surpass the Sullivan family. While he was thinking along those lines, he noticed Walter looking at him before he started, Mr. Scott. As soon as Yoel heard that, he hastily rushed forward. Mr. Grange. Is there anything I can do for you? You're not allowed to attend the banquet today, so please go back. Walter ordered him to leave right in front of all the guests there. Hearing that, Yoel was stunned, and he gaped at the man in disbelief. Mr. Grange, without even waiting for him to finish speaking, Walter waved a hand. Someone, escort him out. While Yoel was very much confounded, he couldn't shamelessly stay there, so he had no choice but to whirl around and leave. Following that, everyone wondered whether the Scott family had offended Walter. By then, Josephine had already sneaked in with Kai. The two of them were watching secretly in a corner. "Let's hide first. We'll go out when the banquet begins in a while. Then, we won't get caught so easily," Josephine murmured as she surreptitiously poked her head out. "Why should we hide? Since we're here, let's just go out openly." Right after saying that, Kai walked straight out. Stricken, Josephine quickly stepped forward to pull him back. Alas, all she grasped was empty air. "Mr. Chance is here," Tommy exclaimed in exhilaration when he spotted Kai. Upon hearing that, Walter raised his eyes. The instant he caught sight of Kai, delight showed on his face, and he strode toward the younger man. Among the crowd, William broke out in a cold sweat when he saw Kai making an appearance and Walter heading straight for the man. "Crap. I was the one who told Josephine to sneak him in, so I'm dead if Mr. Grange finds out about it." William promptly rushed to the front while throwing looks at Jared, signaling him to leave post-haste. He blocked Walter's path and fibbed, "Mr. Grange, that's a server at the hotel, and he's probably taken a wrong turn and came here instead." Right then, Josephine had also caught up to Jared. She dragged him away while muttering, "Just how inattentive were you that you didn't even watch where you were going and ended up here instead?" "Wait a moment." Walter called her back at once. Halting in her tracks, Josephine dropped her hold on Jared. "I apologize for my mismanagement that a server barged in, Mr. Grange. I'll be sure to give you an explanation later." William was sweating bullets, afraid that Walter would fly into a rage. Unexpectedly, Walter was taken aback. "Are you saying that Mr. Chance is an employee of your family?" "Yes." William nodded in affirmation, but in the next second, he froze. "MMR Chance? Huh? How does he know that Jared's family name is Chance? And he's even addressing him as Mr. "Yes, that's right. The guest of honor of my banquet this time is Mr. Chance. All the other guests are just here for the company," Walter explained with a nod. This time, William and Josephine were stumped and couldn't make sense of the entire situation. "I hope I'm not late, Mr. Grange?" Jared inquired with a smile as he took 2 steps forward. "You're right on time, Mr. Chance. And this is?" Walter queried, pointing at Josephine. "This is my daughter, Mr. Grange. She's friends with Mr. Chance." William was indeed a veteran in the business field, for he gathered his wits about him in no time. When Walter heard that, he chuckled. "They're simply a match made in heaven, one handsome and the other beautiful." Following that, all the other guests complimented Jared and Josephine on their compatibility. That had Josephine flushing bright red, and she didn't even dare lift her head. "Do be seated, Mr. Chance. We've been waiting for you." Tommy stepped forward and made a sweeping gesture at Jared. Jared didn't dither either but walked straight toward the main seat. The crowd gathered around him, for despite having no idea who he was, they knew that he would undoubtedly be an influential person in Horrington in the future. Not only was he greatly respected by both Walter and Tommy, but he was also the son-in-law of the Sullivan family, the wealthiest family in the city. As such, none of them dared to offend him. After exchanging a glance, William and Josephine followed as well. When Jared had taken his seat, Walter sat beside him. The other side of him was empty, for no one dared to sit there. "This seat is reserved for you, Ms. Sullivan. You two should sit together since you're a couple." All smiles, Walter beckoned at Josephine. With her face bright red, Josephine shyly sat down beside Jared. The seat a step down from hers was given to William. It should have been Tommy's seat, but if Jared and Josephine were in a relationship, William would then be the former's father-in-law. Thus, Tommy wouldn't dare sit above him. When everyone was seated, Walter lifted a glass of wine and said to Jared, "I'll toast you first, Mr. Chance." He knew that he didn't need to bother about anything else after doing so, since not a single person there was a fool. Thus, they would naturally know what they should do. "You flatter me, Mr. Grange." Picking up his wine glass, Jared downed it in one go. Right as he put his wine glass down, shock deluged Walter, for he had glimpsed the spit on the man's brand new suit. "What happened to your suit, Mr. Chance?" he exclaimed, pointing at the saliva stain on Jared's suit. "Ah, some uncivilized person spat at me twice when I was outside earlier," Jared replied mildly. "Who was so bold to spit on you, Mr. Chance?" Walter's expression darkened, and he swept his gaze over all the guests there. It was no secret that the people outside were family members and the like brought by those seated there. That was why he turned his gaze on them. All at once, everyone's heart leaped to their throats, and they fervently prayed that it wasn't the doing of their family members. It was the doing of the girlfriend of the heir of the Scott family, Leighton Scott. She used to be Mr. Chance's girlfriend, but she now feels that she's superior after hooking up with the Scott family. Hence, she spat on him several times, Josephine chimed in. "The Scott family? How bold of them. I'm going to summon Yoel here and question him right this instant." Walter snarled, slammed his hand onto the table as a frown marred his countenance. "Ah, I now know why he texted to have Yoel kicked out. It turns out that he has such a grudge with the Scott family." Realization immediately dawned upon everyone there, and they knew that the Scott family was going down. It looked like they had to quickly cut off all business ties with the Scott family. "There's no need to be so angry, Mr. Grange. I can resolve such a trifling matter by myself." Jared flashed him a faint smile, not at all bothered about the matter. In that moment, Leighton and Sandy were merely ants in his eyes. Outside the hotel, the scorching sunlight irritated Leighton greatly. "Have some water, Lay." Sandy handed Leighton a bottle of water. Taking a huge gulp of water, Leighton dabbed at the sweat beading on his forehead while softly griping, "Why are we waiting here when we can't go in? This is insanity." Despite his grumbles, he didn't dare leave as he really feared that his father would cut off his allowance for half a year. Just as he was having a drink of water, he suddenly saw his father walking out of the hotel. Elation suffused him, and he hastily exclaimed, "My father is coming out, and I'm sure he's here to inform us that we can go in." With Sandy in tow, he rushed up to Yoel. "Why did you come out, Dad? Was it to tell us that we can go in now?" Leighton asked in excitement. "Keep on dreaming. Even I've been kicked out." Yoel huffed. Leighton was startled for a moment before he demanded, "What happened, Dad? Why were you kicked out? How am I to know that? Anyway, let's leave instead of making a fool of ourselves here." Yoel had come in high spirits, but he could only return with his tail tucked between his legs then. Leighton and Sandy, on the other hand, didn't even get to take a step in the door at all. The banquet had already begun. About 2 hours later, it drew to an end. Everyone's faces were flushed bright red, and they all conversed among themselves in high spirits. "When did you make Mr. Grange's acquaintance, Jared? What's more, he's so polite to you. And you didn't even tell me that you're the guest of honor of the banquet this time." Josephine grumbled in chagrin. She had pulled Jared aside when she saw her opportunity at long last. "You didn't say that you were bringing me to attend a banquet when you dragged me away in a hurry back then. When I later learned about it, I planned to give you a surprise." Jared explained, grinning from ear to ear. "Your surprise is really too much. I just about had a heart attack from the fright back then. You're simply too mean. In the future, you're not allowed to keep any secrets from me." Josephine thumped his chest, but she didn't put much strength into it. In fact, it was no different from a display of affection between lovers. Unexpectedly, Jared grabbed her hand, and they both locked gazes. Neither said anything nor communicated in any way save the interchange of their gazes. Jared gradually leaned closer to Josephine. Josephine wanted to dodge, but she didn't move as conflict brewed within her. Seeing that the man's lips were mere inches away from her, she closed her eyes and waited for the kiss to arrive. "There's a smudge on your face," Jared murmured out of the blue when she was anxiously waiting. Josephine opened her eyes, only to see him regarding her with a devilish smirk on his face. "Ugh. You're so mean. I'm not talking to you anymore." Smacking him hard on the chest, she ran off with a blush staining her face. When William saw that, a faint smile bloomed on his face, and he headed toward Jared. "Do you have any plans for your future, Mr. Chance? Are you interested in establishing your own company?" he asked the younger man. Jared shook his head at once. "Nope. All I want to do right now is to train and improve as soon as possible. As for establishing a company and doing business, I really have no interest in that, nor am I suited for that,"